everyone, and welcome to Forget Me Not Radio, the podcast where we discuss taboo topics and other issues society would rather silence. My name is Amy Dommett, and I'm your host. If you would like more information about Forget Me Not Radio, you can visit amydommett.com/podcast. There you can learn about upcoming episodes and guests, as well as support this project through patreon.com or PayPal. It is through supporters like you that we are able to continue bringing this podcast series to you. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes to stay up to date with new episodes. And if you are already a subscriber, we invite you to go ahead and rate and review us. Your feedback is important. It helps other listeners get an idea of what we are all about from a listener's point of view. Today, I would like to share with you a little bit more about my story. As many of you know, I'm a survivor of a 16-year abusive relationship. And that's how all of this taboo topics conversation came to be. I'm going to talk about a very difficult moment in my marriage. So I should just warn you that it does get very personal and very descriptive. For people who are actually survivors of abuse, it's probably going to touch pretty close to home. But I think it's important to share these types of moments. And the reason for that is because that all-encompassing question that people ask, why? Why didn't you just leave? Why did you stay? I hope to shed some light on that question today. So thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you on the other side. A while back, I heard domestic violence referred to as, quote, an act of terrorism, or, quote, murder. I still hold to the idea that unless you personally experience something, it is very difficult to fundamentally understand it. What we experience in our own lives makes us who we are, molds our grasp on life, our beliefs, our fears, and our general outlook. Everyone has their own demons, and sometimes, no matter how strong, how educated, or how supported you are, you may find yourself struggling with something and not be able to verbalize why or how you got to that place that you find yourself in. So you work each day to move forward and not back from that issue that you still have not dealt with. It may be a struggle. You may have highs and lows. You may crash and have to dig yourself out again. Or you may soar higher than you ever have before and never look back. But no matter where you are in your journey, and no matter how much support you have, you may still feel alone. I used to wonder if this was normal, but I know now that it is. Sometimes we have to face our fears and struggles in a way that only we can, whatever that is. But in order to even begin to do that, we have to first understand what it is that we are dealing with. That, I believe, is why I found these two descriptions interesting. It put a name on what I went through, what I am still dealing with, that was far more on par with my feelings. Even as a victim, I believe we often downplay the experience. At least I do. Thinking, I survived, so it must not have been that bad. Therefore, I should not have the feelings and hurts that I have. Buck up, move on. But maybe it's not that simple. Maybe we have to see it for what it is, accept it for what it is, and face it head on. I'm not simply referring to myself and other victims of abuse. I'm referring to society, to you. If we don't understand abuse, if we are unable to relate to domestic violence victims, or if we simply refuse to acknowledge its existence, then how can we make positive change? We can't. As a victim, I must understand and face the realities of what I endured. As a member of society, I must recognize abuse for what it is and be willing to put myself in the shoes of a victim before I am able to help them. This passage was taken from a blog that I read called A Cry for Justice. A Cry for Justice can be found at cryoutforjustice.wordpress.com. This definition literally blew me away. It was the first time I heard a description of what I felt I had endured. It brought the reality of abuse to light for even me, someone who had lived with abuse for over 16 years. I quote, "Very few people know what abuse really is, though everyone seems quite ready to give advice to its victims. If you believe abuse is a physical battering, you have some learning to do. Abuse is fundamentally a mentality. It is a mindset of entitlement. The abuser sees himself as entitled. He is the center of the world, and he demands that his victim make him the center of her world. His goal is power and control over others. For him, power and control are his natural right, and he feels quite justified in using whatever means are necessary to obtain that power and control. The abuser is not hampered in these efforts by the pangs of a healthy conscience, and indeed often lacks a conscience. While this mentality of power and control often expresses itself in various forms of physical abuse, it just as frequently employs tactics of verbal, emotional, financial, social, sexual, and spiritual abuse. Thus, an abuser may never actually lay a hand on his wife and yet be very actively terrorizing her in incredibly damaging ways. Abuse in any of its forms destroys the victim's person. Abuse, in the end, is murder. In my case, my husband was my abuser, but in many other instances, abusers are female. Abuse does not discriminate. It doesn't matter what race you are, what your marital status is. It doesn't matter if you are LGBT or if you are straight. All of that is irrelevant. Abuse is about power and control. The realities of this definition, however, are beyond enlightening. Abuse is murder. It is the destruction of oneself at the hands and manipulation of another. I've stated many times that there came a point when I did not even recognize the person staring back at me in the mirror. It pains me to this day when I remember my eyes. They lacked everything. I recall standing in the bathroom of my home, looking in the mirror, trying to watch the puffiness of tears away, trying desperately to remove the red from my eyes that the sobbing had brought on. The sobbing from fear, from loss of love, and from the sheer ripping out of my heart. My husband had just destroyed everything. He not only degraded me with his words, he had punched me numerous times in the side of my head, kicked me until I cowered in the corner, screamed unimaginable names at me, and proceeded to shatter a wedding picture that hung on the wall. In the process, he had cut his hand on the glass of the picture frame. His response? He threatened to call the ambulance and cops and tell them that I cut him with a knife. He even went so far as to pull the knife from a kitchen drawer and show me as if it were a prop in his madness. I had caused him to lose control, he told me. I had brought this on myself. I brought out the worst in him. I was a horrible human being he should have never married. He hated me, and he wanted me dead. It was up to me to drive him to the hospital and be on my best behavior. If I didn't, he would turn me over to the cops. Of course they would believe him. He was the one who was injured, and me? I was just a sobbing mess of a person who had gone crazy on him. I needed to look better than I did. My eyes had dark circles. The whites were bloodshot. My face was swollen with tears, and the back and the back of my head were screaming in pain. But my wounds, they couldn't be seen. He knew better than that. Only once did he leave a visible mark on me. He was strategic in his physical attacks, but he couldn't erase my response. He couldn't erase the tiredness in my face or the obvious sign of more tears that should ever fall. That face, those eyes, I didn't recognize. They were the window into a broken and empty soul that was once alive. The girl that once filled my body was long dead, and only a ghost of a person remained. As I share my story, I often like to go back and see how far I've come. In August of 2014, after a year and a half of not writing a blog piece, I penned these words. Over the past few weeks, I have had several conversations about where my life is right now, in this very moment. I have also made choices that are outside of my comfort zone, trying to step back from life as I know it and see it from an outside perspective, removing myself from situations that negatively affect me, and trying to do what is best for me, even when I analyze how it could all go wrong. And by wrong, I mean not the way I want it to go. During these conversations, I have heard myself saying over and over again, this past year I have learned to let go of so much. I have grown so much. My life has been blessed so much. Life is fun. And it has been. The problem is, even though I have grown and found so much peace, I have still managed to analyze everything and put my primary focus on the negatives. And with all of that, I sometimes feel very broken. Anyone outside looking in on my life would say I have it pretty good. My support system of family and friends is more than anyone could ask for. I mean, true friends, the kind that call you at 3 a.m. because they see you online and just know that you are crying. The kind that pull you out of the house when you want to hide in the dark and never again speak to anyone. The kind that remind you how to be a kid again. The kind that struggle with their own issues and still find time to support you. The kind that push you and encourage you to grow as an individual in every way. Those kind of friends. And this is why I write today. Even after all the time that has passed since my last post, I still see people from around the world logging onto the website and reading what I had to say. I want everyone searching to see that it all gets better, if we allow it. Finding the strength to move forward is hard, but you can find the freedom you crave and the happiness you want. This blog has been about surviving domestic violence, which was my personal struggle. But so many have personal struggles and baggage that they carry with them every day. These struggles affect us all differently and really build us into who we are. As of the last time I wrote, I was still a bit of a loner, not really getting out and meeting new people. So I had to work around that. I had friends from work, I had friends that were close to me, but everybody was coming from a different situation. They had families, they had different interests than I did. And because of all this, I was still spending way too much time alone. Yet, if you see what I wrote, I was feeling pretty good about where I was and how far I had come emotionally. Looking back, I can see that I still had and still do have much further to go. And although some may question this statement later, there has been a lot of growth in the past year. I say these things not because I believe that what I have done in the past year is of interest to anyone reading it, but for the same reason I shared my story in the past. I firmly believe that knowing you are not alone and learning how others have dealt with what you are going through gives us hope, and that we can be who we are truly meant to be. Nothing can stop us from growing into happy individuals with a firm hold on our own life. Our own head is the only thing that holds us back. Memories will be triggered. Behaviors will need to be relearned. Struggles will have to be overcome, but we must firmly let go of the past so that it does not follow us and haunt us. It's hard, but it can be done. It takes time. We can't beat ourselves up for going through our own process. We must accept who we are and consciously decide to make a change in ourselves that we want to be different. A support system is crucial, and living life, your life, is a must. I stopped writing because it was a reminder to me of my hurts. I figured it was no longer helping my healing, but it was hurting my healing instead. I walked away from it, and I focused on the happy me. Am I all better? Absolutely not. But I am so much better than I was. Each day, each month, each year is growth. What used to push me into depression and emotionally cripple me does not have the same grip that it once did. I have ventured out of my comfort zone, and in the process have met so many people with similar interests, which means I am always out living my life and enjoying all that I kept from my life earlier on. I found a sport that I love, a way to be more fit, reduce stress, and a positive mechanism for pushing myself that does not involve trying to fix someone or something. I have found love for myself, and through this healing process, I am relearning to support others in a healthy way, learning how to take care of my heart, and learning how to separate myself from the things that make me sad. It is never an easy journey. Decisions and choices must be made that are hard. Steps must be taken that are completely the opposite of what I believed to be the best in the past. And relearning has to take place. But you're not alone in this. When you open yourself up to others and stop hiding who you are, you learn very quickly that you're not alone. You learn it's okay to be you. It's okay to grow, and it's okay to let go. Life is beautiful if you allow it to be. And as with most posts and talks that I give, it comes full circle. Life is beautiful. There is hope. You can have the life you've always envisioned. You are not alone. If you have been tuned into this podcast, you have already heard stories of hope and survival. You've heard some of my story. You have learned about those who are fighting to make the world a better place by supporting victims of abuse. It is because of these people, because of those who are willing to share their stories, that others can find hope. We as a society can be the change that is needed to stop these stories from even happening in the first place. And that comes back to what I mentioned earlier. We have to see domestic violence for what it is, a murder. It is a murder of individuals at the hands of another. They may still be physically alive, but their very being has been stripped from them. That is cause for alarm. That should not be happening. It's unacceptable behavior that we often brush aside with the simple question, why didn't they just leave? We place the blame on the victim because we don't understand the realities of what domestic violence is. Are you willing to talk, to share, to learn? By doing so, you can help change the tide of how society views domestic violence. I hope you will. Let's end the taboo and create a world where individuals can grow and thrive. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you gathered some interesting information and that it inspires you to go out and learn more. But until then, I will see you on our next episode of Taboo Topics. Have a great one.